Here they all start coming in. Fantastic. Hello, everybody. Great to have you here. Hi, Claudia.
Oh, great
Right.
turnout.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Fantastic.
Thanks
Marvelous. Well,
for
look, I think
joining, everyone.
we will definitely get going. It is so good to see you all here. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to those who've got their screen on. Those of you who've got it turned off, please turn it on because we'd love to see your smiley faces. It also makes it so much nicer for our presenters to see you. I see a lot of people are using note takers. That's probably a good idea. Okay, this is the second in our series. Looking forward to hearing our speakers today, who is going to be very capably led by Claire Gallagher, who has joined us, as you know, this session. But thank you to Lisa, who is from Precinct, and thank you to Kishan, who is from South Bay. So two of our sponsors joining us today. So I will hand over to Claire. Thank you for
Thank,
joining us.
thanks, Amanda, and thanks everyone who joined. I don't know if any of you came last time, but this is the second in our Keystone Sustainability series. Each one has a different theme, so thinking of things that we felt might be useful to know as you go into the workforce and whether you have a sustainability role or a non-sustainability role. A lot of the themes and ways of working that we're talking about are pretty applicable no matter what kind of work you do. Today's session is on finding your allies. So it's about thinking about how influence works and who to connect with to help communicate ideas and make them successful. And I'm extremely pleased to be joined by two of my personal allies who I've been working with closely over the last 6 months, but I've known for a bit longer than that. Our first speaker is Lisa from Precinct Property, and our second speaker is Kishan from South Base. And the format of the session will be a little bit of an introduction. Then Lisa will talk for, I think, the first sort of 10 to 12 minutes, then Kishan, and then we can take questions. So we had quite a lot last time. You're welcome to put them into, I think it's the chat probably. There's not a Q&A yet. So put them in the chat and we'll then have a bit of a conversation at the end. Um, just a quick intro. For, I don't know if we were all here last time or not. I'm Claire. I'm from Built. I'm the National Sustainability Manager. We're head contractors working across the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. And I started in Australia at Built 10 years ago and was working in Australia at the same time as Lisa, our first speaker, but we never really knew, like we kind of knew of each other there, but didn't work directly together. And then both moved to New Zealand around the same time. So I kind of joke with Lisa that even though I'm the born and bred Kiwi from Auckland, she knows more people here than I do because she is so good at finding allies. And she has personally been an amazing ally to me. And over, I think, many coffees, I've asked her how to deal with tricky situations or how to understand something that she's done that I haven't. And she's always incredibly generous with her time and sharing. And that's the kind of the way you learn on the job and having those connections sort of beyond the place you're working from and having people you can talk to help you along the way. So I am first going to actually I might hold it on that slide for a second. But I just thought, Lisa, look, can you tell us a little bit about your current role and also your background, what you studied, and how you came to work in sustainability?
Well, first, I would really like to acknowledge that it's definitely a two-way street. Like, I definitely feel once I landed in New Zealand that, uh, Claire, you've been such a supporter. And I feel like, in a future session, you could definitely facilitate this topic quite well, given your network, and might know a few people in the traps here, but you're definitely very well connected across both Australia and New Zealand. So just wanted to acknowledge that. And yeah, so my role, so I work for Precinct. and we're the largest inner city developer of real estate across Auckland and Wellington. And you may be familiar with Precinct based on our involvement with Keystone. Our deputy CEO is the chair of the committee for the businesses that support Keystone. And please correct me if I am misrepresenting anyone in that way, but I'm fairly certain that's George's involvement. And we do quite a few different things at Precinct. So we not only develop real estate, but we also manage the properties once they're built. And we manage them on the basis of property management, facilities management, and also funds management. So quite a few dollar figures there. We've recently moved into student accommodation and built to sell residential. And we're very excited to be moving into new and exciting asset classes and projects, and how sustainability is interpreted across those new typologies. And so how I came into sustainability, very interestingly, I graduated during the global financial crisis. So I graduated from uni and found myself with a business degree and not sure which field to enter into when nobody was hiring anywhere. And so I ended up getting a team assistant role at an engineering firm. And from there, there was a sustainability team, and I just really loved it. I worked my way up in that firm, and the rest, they say, is history. And I've been happily involved in sustainability and property for around 15 years now. So I started on the design consultancy side, and we spend quite a lot of time working on one individual building. And then when we got into, taking buildings through design, construction, commissioning, it was quite a number of years dedicated to one building, and I felt my passion was definitely in moving many buildings up in terms of their efficiency and performance at once. So when Claire and I were operating in the same circles back in Australia, I moved into the operational side, working for big real estate agencies over there. So yeah, about me, that's my dog in the picture there, looking like a cat, which I thought was quite funny at the time, so I thought I'd share that. I am Australian, so please don't hold that against me. I feel very conflicted between my allegiances when it comes to sport here, and do sway to the New Zealand side on quite a regular basis.
Good to hear.
Well, it's just far more entertaining, and I think it's very easy to get involved in the different leagues here, whereas in Australia it's different.
Anyway, it's not a sports conversation.
It's not a sports conversation. I want to eat up my time.
Yep.
And so I've been here for 3 years. I enjoy the flatter bureaucratic structure and the work-life balance here. In Australia, the same role that I would do over there would be quite a lot more management of people, and I like getting my hands dirty, so that's pretty cool. I share this with only a few people, I think, that I actually nerd out on constantly changing standards. I like the way that the industry progresses in some ways, where, when a new standard is released, we kind of get to nerd out on what the latest and greatest is. I enjoy systems thinking and how we can genuinely do things better, and I'm fortunate to work with Precinct because they believe in that too. And networks are everything, and not just in work, but in life and following your passion. So in terms of building allies, and I was sitting down thinking about this yesterday and prior to the call, and I think, the best thing you can do is to observe and understand the ecosystem that you find yourself in. Because if you're anything like me, you want to go full ball into trying to influence straight off the bat, and sometimes it's best to just understand and get the lay of the land before jumping into too intensely. And I think when I learnt that I will never be the subject matter expert on everything, it actually relieved me of a lot of pressure, and I could focus on the things that genuinely interested me and not necessarily pull out targets of people to focus on becoming friends with or networking with who had the gaps in their knowledge. But I think when you're aligned in your values and you're working in the same field, you just organically find those people. And you will form friendships with people in the industries that you operate in. And it's good to do that. I wouldn't necessarily form friendships with people out of a non-genuine capacity to network. I think that's probably a good message. People can tend to tell if you're not genuine in the reason you're wanting to get to know them and work with them. But I think if you're passionate about your industry, you will naturally find people that are very similarly minded. I like to make a mental note of what different people in my network are pretty good at, and not necessarily to keep tabs on them and call them up when I need a favor, but just to know, if I get stuck on something that needs a quick response, or if I'm friends with someone who happens to be a subject matter expert, then I know that I can call them if I need. And in return, I think offering your support and your subject matter expertise has been quite good. And I think it's a very reciprocal, very relationship, very network-driven industry that we're in property. And I find it's really dynamic in that way. So I think lean into that. Spend time understanding the routine barriers. So if you're trying to get something across and you keep getting knocked back, like what are the routine barriers that you're encountering that could be the issue? And also seeing the opportunity in failure. So if you connect with similarly minded people to solve a problem, and the best case, you solve the problem, worst case, you built a relationship with someone or a group of people that you can work with again on the following challenge. So yeah,
Can I
so just
dive into just we're going quite well for time, but when you said spend time understanding the routine barriers, can you think of an example of something like that, that just to sort of illustrate a little bit more about what that might mean in a project sense?
Yeah, like I think probably one recently would be solar. And so when we were talking, because I'm a massive renewable energy fan, and I didn't mean to use the pun about wind turbines, but I am a big fan of renewable energy, and I was quite surprised over here at how little uptake there is, given the tipping point of its value proposition being quite strong. And I found that bringing up the conversations with certain groups, say it was the development team or it was the investment property team, there was a reluctance to pursue it as an option. And so I think just walking into a room and saying you should put solar on your rooftops because it is better for the environment and that's what we need to move forward with is one way to approach it. But I find when you're new to a group or new to an organization or new to the industry, it can be seen as not understanding the full context. And I think if you can understand why there's barriers, and in this case, it was just the wrong money coming from the wrong bucket at the wrong time, then you can work on a solution that addresses that barrier, because a good idea is a good idea. It should stack up. So what is the barrier that's presented to you at that time? And I think working with your network, whether it's internal or external, to help build the business case around why something should work in those contexts is quite key. And it's interesting how different people see a problem and a solution as well, because some of the ideas that we got out of that work, particularly with the funds managers who previously may not have seen the opportunity, but then when you say, hey, it's CapEx that we've got to spend that may not align with the mandate of the fund or mandate of the building, how can we rejig it to suit? And yeah, they're full of ideas in that context. So yeah, it's
Finding people who know where the right bucket of money is
Yeah,
and when it can be
yeah.
spent.
Finding people with the right bucket of money is always helpful.
All right.
But I think if we move to the next slide, there's I think a couple of points on that kind of talk to that as well. And I know we're rushing through this because I want to give Krishan his time as well. But I think my top tips would be start with a genuine passion. So if you have an idea, if you have a path that you want to pursue with your career or an initiative that you want to see rolled out, your passion will be contagious if presented, to the right people at the right time, and to always think of the outcome of what that initiative could do for the audience that you want to influence. So it's one thing to say, we should do this and this is the way we should do it. Most people won't get a lot of the technical steps of the process, but they'll understand more of the outcome. And so if you say we want to reduce energy use, or we want to engage with more diverse suppliers, and we want to, what is the outcome you're wanting to achieve with your initiative? And people can kind of visualize it a bit better. When you experience resistance, because you will every day of my career in sustainability, I've had many instances of resistance. It helps you find out ways to address and become very thick-skinned, but it also helps you become a better professional to adapt to the surroundings that you're in. And so I think when you experience it, it's always good to think about why there's resistance to something that's a good idea. And kind of similar to that example with the solar, like, why would anyone want to part with money that they would otherwise have? Seems like a pretty, decent question to ask yourself when you're putting something up. And if there's a pain point, how can your solution address that? Or when you ask that question and your solution is actually contributing to it, or the perception of it is contributing to it. So I want to, meet my budget expectations and KPIs for this year, and I can't do that with the solution that's being proposed. And if it follows through, then I'm worse off as a property manager, facilities manager, etc. I think it's a hard question we have to ask ourselves sometimes when the initiative is good, but it's just at the wrong time, or is not the right audience. But that's not to say it's a no forever. It's just a no for right now. And so working out what the pain point is and whether your solution can actually address it as well down the track. And means to an end is okay. And I know this one sounds a bit controversial, but I do think when you're operating in property circles and you have a sustainability initiative, I think the latest trend for our industry, because we always pivot. We pivot from saying sustainable when it's in favour, when there's really strong support in the market for sustainability from investors, from government, from others, like in that wording. But sometimes when the market is tight, we do revert to value creation and resilience as opposed to sustainability. So when I say means to an end, you may have to rejig some wording around your initiative, or working with the people that are otherwise motivated to approach the topic or your initiative from a different way. And yeah, I mean, Claire, do you think I've explained that one?
You have. And
Yeah.
if you've got some questions for Lisa, now we'll wrap up with her now and go to Kishan, but just jot them down so you can remember them later. I'll introduce second speaker, Kishan, who was also someone who sprang to mind when thinking about allies, because he's been the most excellent ally for me also this recent, probably 6 months, because Kishan doesn't actually work in sustainability. He's a structural engineer working for a contractor that we're working with, but he knows about sustainability and he knows what needs to be achieved in order to reach the right sustainability outcomes. So it's the kind of person that I feel like he's in all the meetings and I'm not. And I always feel like there's someone who's kind of got their eye on the sustainable, not kind of, has their eye on the sustainability ball, even when I can't be in everything. So those kind of allies are also really important. People that have, the and some people sort of narrow, like, no, I only do this for a job. And then other people you'll find are great. They'll bring everything in, and they're that ability to kind of not only stay in your lane, but recognize the broader project goals and what needs to be achieved and how you can help contribute to the achievement of them makes life easier for everybody. It's the perfect kind of project team when you have that going on. So without further ado, I'll maybe lead in with the first question. Kashan, I already said you're not a sustainability, the word sustainability I don't think is in your title. So what do
No.
you do, and how did you come to sort of have an interest in sustainability along the way?
Yeah, thanks, Claire. Thanks for kind words. As Claire mentioned, I'm a structural engineer by background. So I've been doing structural engineering for about 12 years now, still doing structural engineering. And probably about 5 years ago, I started getting involved in advising clients on sort of carbon reduction, low carbon design. And that's mainly drawing on my background doing structural engineering, particularly around seismic and resilience of buildings. So we used to do a lot of retrofits, a lot of fit outs, so reusing existing buildings. It's quite a good sustainable outcome. The best outcome is a building you don't have to build, and the building you don't have to build is one that's already there. So, and so I got into it because it's with seismic engineering, and that's all very complex, and I found sustainability to be the next complex problem to solve. And so I've kind of gone into that and been doing that for about 4 or 5 years. And, as Lisa mentioned, there's different words, sustainability, depending on who you're talking to, it's, driving value, as well. If you're
A lot
making,
of sorry to jump in, but a lot of structural engineers just say it's good, efficient design.
yeah,
If you're
yeah,
not put a building heaps of stuff you don't need.
that was going to be the next word.
Ah, no, sorry, I'm gonna shush. Sorry, go on.
So Claire took it right out of my mouth. Like you do something really efficient, you reduce waste. That's driving for sustainable outcomes. So just getting things really efficient. Yeah, it's just really um, it's just really good design. Really, I think.
Yeah.
So hence, as Claire mentioned, it's something I always keep in the back of my mind on how we can drive for these outcomes, because there's a misnomer out there that sustainability typically means things cost you more, and I think it's the total opposite. Things should be more value driven if it's sustainable. You're using less material, using less energy. It's people like Claire and Lisa and with help from people like myself on how we explain that story to the public. You might spend more money up front, but over the whole life of your asset, you actually spend less, which actually drives better value for your product. Then you get high rental yields and stuff like that. So there's a whole financial aspect of it that actually drives better outcomes as well. This slide was just explaining a bit about Southbase and what we do. So my role at Southbase, I'm responsible for kind of all the design direction of all the jobs we do up here in the North Island. And we've done about $2.5 billion worth of jobs to date, over 14 years. And as Claire mentioned, at the moment, we're assisting Built on a project here in Auckland, which has been great. Do you want to go on to the next slide, Claire?
This one, we'll keep going.
Yeah, this is Southbase, some of the projects we're doing. Each one of them we've come at with a sustainable lens. I'll just go through a few just for people's knowledge on how you can apply it all differently on different jobs. So MPI, Fact Biosecurity and Containment Lab. We were on an ECI on that job. So drawing on my knowledge as structural engineer, we did some optioneering with the structural engineer on reducing concrete for that job. And that was more around making the structure more efficient. actually save the client some money as well in the long run. Looking at, for that job, an airtight facade, which also reduces the HVAC operational requirements. Then, looking down social housing, that one, for example, that was about 70 houses for Ronald McDonald House. We did that with our, we used to own a modular factory in Christchurch, Interfab. So we did all the cassette framing for that housing development using 3D modeling. And we ran it through a CNC machine, which actually meant we were able to reduce carpentry waste. So if people don't know, carpentry as a trade produces about 20% in waste. If you were to do it off-site, you can reduce the number to about 4%, 4 to 3%. So if you think about, a builder, when they're building a building and you go by the building site and you typically just see all these offcuts of timber. So that's what we're trying to avoid with that project. And then the student accommodation job, we did some value engineering on the structure to reduce the amount of intumescent paint on it as well, which actually help because they can tend to have high VOC contents, which is not good for air quality and stuff like that. So, as Claire mentioned, there's all these little bits and pieces here and there where you can kind of pick at to drive, better, not only better outcomes for the client, but better also sustainability outcomes in general.
And I think having that working knowledge of where the relationship is between structure and sustainability means that I guess you can use it too as a point of leverage when you're trying to maybe present a more efficient structural option or a different way of doing things. You can show a co-benefit. All right, I think coming up to my favorite slide, which kind of goes back to the first question, but a little bit about like what you studied, how you came through and heard a little bit about where you are now.
Yeah. So yeah, in 12 years industry, 12 years structural engineer, last 3 years at South Base. I say I'm still a structural engineer because I'm still registered as well. So I still do a bit of design on the side, just to keep the tool sharp. My partner's in construction as well. So she does ports and marine engineering. She's always, over the last few years, she's always asking me why people keep talking about sustainability and stuff like that. So I kind of explain it to her, and then she tells me it's just efficient design because she's also kind of like an engineer as well. And I'm like, oh, there's added benefits beyond that and stuff like that. So we have 2 kids, which take up quite a lot of our time as well. So that's us in the bottom right as well. My son's 3.5, 1.5, quite a handful, run around as well. And they actually learn quite a lot about sustainability in daycare as well. It comes up quite a lot as well.
Starting them young.
Yeah. Recycling, stuff like that, which
I
is
think
great.
it's quite small, but that screenshot down the bottom, is that the paper that you
Yes.
put out last year? I mean, that was a really interesting piece of work in terms of challenging that theory that sustainability is expensive. And from what I understand, you can probably talk to it more, but South Base went out to the market and got real information back on like, can you give us these kinds of sustainable products and materials? And what are the barriers? And maybe you can continue a little bit there, Kishan.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. So probably about a year and a half ago, we interviewed we surveyed 140 subcontractors, and then probably interviewed about 40 of them. And that was mainly around what we call is getting rid of stigma on sustainability is expensive, and it drives down the feasibility of projects. Pretty much overwhelmingly, all of them said they don't think it costs you anything. And it's kind of like a step process. If you get subcontractors involved early, builders involved early, like Claire and I, we can help embed sustainability into the design that makes it efficient. It more starts to be expensive if you were to run a traditional project where you design, and then you do specification at the end, where you have less levers to pull. So, and that's kind of what we try to influence. There's a big curve. The most amount of influence you have on a project is right at the beginning. and it's the most amount of influence you have on cost, sustainable outcomes. So if you're trying to do it all at the end, it's just going to cost you more. So, and MB actually has a really good curve about that in their sustainability guidelines as well. So we did that, and quite a lot of what they were talking about is, if you were to, like examples, if you were to procure steel, you procure it early enough, it doesn't cost you anything because then you can bake in the lead times to make sure you get it from the right plants and stuff like that. If you were to run a 2-month tender, for example, it's quite common in build-only projects, then you might have to pay a premium to make sure you get it from certain mills to meet that certain EPD or global warming potential requirement for that certain material.
So it was like understanding them better to understand how much time they need to be able to do these things with the least amount of cost as well, and not sort of just trying to add it all on in a rush at the end.
Yeah. So I'll take concrete as like a good example. For a lot of people think concrete has quite a lot of carbon associated with it. So if you take concrete in terms of composition, it's about, say, 20-30% water, 60-70% sand and aggregate, and about 2-3% steel in terms of how it's built volumetrically. And if you think about carbon of concrete, it's about probably 60% carbon of the concrete comes from the steel in it, and then the rest is from the the cement and all that stuff. So that kind of shifts your mindset on how you approach design. Do you you go for minimum reinforcement, larger members, stuff like that. So these are all the conversations we try to shape very early on the job that cost the client nothing. And then some of the jobs I've been involved with in past life, like the job for Lisa and a team, 61 Moleswood Street. As a Green Star job, there was a lot of steel in that job, and that was all procured from a mill in Thailand, which was a low carbon mill, which comparatively had a good outcome as well. And that was a resilient building that uses a structural system called tuned viscous dampers, which is a new technology at the time, which effectively meant we were able to get rid of quite a lot of concrete in the building as well, compared to a traditional. The one on the right will spawn 90 Devonport Road, so that's a mass timber building. That's the largest mass timber building in New Zealand for a commercial office, so that's 12-story mass timber. That's quite a nice design as well, in terms of how the timber integrates with the steel and the fit out. That was quite a good outcome as well for a client. And then University of Auckland B201, so that was one of the first projects I did. That was a large refurbishment and reuse job. So the University of Auckland approached us at the time saying, we want to demolish this building and rebuild a new building in about 10 years. Can you help us do some interim refurbishment? And then we work with them on kind of creating a business case for them that actually, if you were to spend that money, you're going to refurb it and actually put a little bit more money into it, you could actually extend the life of this building another 50 years. And that was mainly reusing the existing structure, replacing the facade, which was precast panels, because this building also had seismic issues.
So, and I think for everyone who went to the award ceremony at the very beginning of the year, that was the space that Keystone event was held in.
Yeah. So, for example, that building, that had seismic issues. We got rid of the precast facade, replaced it with lightweight curtain wall, which actually helped the seismic rating. But with us explaining the story with the client, they actually were able to get shovel-ready funding from the government, which a lot of entities were competing for them. So that was like an interest-free loan for the government to build the building effectively. And if you, as Claire mentioned, if you had your sort of presentation in the front entrance foyer, that's all passively ventilated as well, which is quite cool because it's a very large open space as well to passively ventilate. And then,
No, it was it got a lot of awards too. I've put we've got a question. I knew you guys were going to do this. You went crazy on them last time. All right. So, Lisa, are you ready? You've dropped off my main screen there, but I think if you start talking, you'll pop up again. But first question from Ted. Thank you both, by the way. And Ted's question is, sustainability is very much a global movement nowadays. Much of our learning is from overseas. I'd be really interested to hear more about finding allies in sustainability across cultures and borders, especially seeing as the understanding of sustainability is so different from place to place. That's a great question. Lisa, do you want to respond first on that?
That is a great question. And I think it's interesting when you think about what constitutes a sustainable building and what constitutes sustainability or green buildings in general. And the jury's always out. And I think the audience determines the focus in a lot of ways. So the way that we design and build and construct a sustainability strategy is very much directed by the approach taken from investors or our occupiers, but also with the constant themes of in the built environment, there's key aspects that are always going to be important, and that's climate adaptation, climate mitigation. So adaptation is what you do to the building to make it more resilient to the outside in. So as the climate changes, we adapt our structures to better withstand how the climate is changing. And then mitigation is about what we can do with the way that we conduct our business that is supportive of a low carbon and resilient future. But there's also a growing push to have a more holistic view, particularly as it involves more voices to the conversation. And I think the way that we can kind of work more closely with our neighbours in Australia and more broadly across Asia Pacific and around the world is how we acknowledge our First Nations, Indigenous cultures, our diverse participants in the society that we operate in, how we amplify voices that are a bit different from the mainstream in the way that property sometimes can present itself. And I think that is probably one of the more dynamic and evolving aspects of sustainability and property at the moment, and the most easy to engage in from different aspects. I think the focus on carbon is incredibly important. We know that the majority of our carbon emissions comes from exactly what Krishan was just mentioning. So the building materials that go into how we construct our buildings is our biggest carbon impact by far. And not losing sight of that and working around with suppliers around the world and different groups around the world to see what best practice looks like. But I think it would be remiss of me not to say that the best examples of really great low carbon projects exist right here in New Zealand. And I think it should be something we celebrate and learn more from each other and share more of those case studies with our neighbours and other property groups around the world. But yeah, it's a great industry to connect across different geographies. So yeah, hopefully that helps answer the question. It's a wide church, sustainability.
Kishan, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, some of what Lisa was saying, for example, I've done some jobs in the Pacific where, there's talk about climate adaptation and resilience and then mitigation and then, managed retreat as well, particularly along the coastline. But it's quite important not to approach all of those with kind of like your expertise lens. There's like a holistic view on things you need to take. And each of it has its own pros and cons as well. And then I think that's the good thing about sustainability. You can everyone can kind of come together and kind of pick the right outcome that might have. And I think the key part is you can't always get it perfect as well. Like there's always going to be some drawbacks, but if you get the desired outcome that kind of has the majority of what you're after, that's usually quite great. And some of the stuff also we've learned from overseas, in my previous job before being a builder was we were going through a study on how we actually do, like as a sector, how we allocate carbon and how we build jobs. So, do we set like an average carbon target for every job we do, or should we say, as a absolute value, this is how much carbon we'll do as a business per year? And that's actually very hard to determine. And there's a lot of papers overseas on how to
there
do that.
are with different parameters. I have a different perspective on this, Ted, which is that I worked for the New Zealand Green Building Council, and they're part of an international network. And I felt like working for a business like that with international counterparts was a really good way to find international people to talk to. And then they'll have conferences. And then if you're not going to work for a business like that, there's also networks like the International Well Building Institute, which are also global and really good at building connections between different countries. And people that you can sort of ask the area leads, can I, someone in this area that I can talk to about this issue? The publications that are available for all of us to go and look at online are everywhere, and that's another way to learn. But I think that personal connection can sometimes be established through those global networks. Mandy, you've asked a very hard question here. How can we do this in few minutes? Okay, quick answers and thinking about a takeaway message, guys. Is there ever a project you are presented with and the client isn't as interested in sustainability issues or matches your values? How do you manage that conversation?
I could start with that if you want. So I think I mentioned in my slide, it's all about how you approach the conversation with other stakeholders. Like, not everyone's going to have the same passion as you have, but there's a desired outcome for the group in general, and it's kind of finding what their lever is to push. So, for example, as I mentioned, sustainability outcome for buildings is reducing carbon and reducing materials for, say, the building structure. So we'll approach it on, actually, we're going to save you money if you go down this path for that particular client. And then we'll say, and look, you have the added benefit of all these other things that tier off it. So that's how I'd manage that as an example.
Lisa, have you ever had a client that exceeded your sustainability passion? Or is you always...
I've had many on both sides, and I was actually inspired by a presentation that I saw from an architect, because I'm an oversharer. Like, I like knowing things, and if I meet someone and it's a client or a developer or another developer or otherwise, I like conveying a lot of information to make sure that they understand, like, the drivers of what I've experienced. And I went to a session by an architect who was talking through a project that he had just finished, and he built it to Passive House standard, and it was incredible what he was able to achieve, and it was a very small budget. And everyone was like, how did you get the client? Or sorry, it was a very large budget, I should say. Oh. And he was like, when we asked him, how did you get the client to agree to that? And the architect just said, well, he had a budget. I had the skills to deliver on this type of design. And so I just need to know basis, like, in terms of what he was getting. And so in a way, I think that's, it's always good to be upfront and disclose what you're doing on behalf of a client. But where there's gaps, you can fill them with your knowledge on something, provided it's within a budget. And I think that was quite valuable, particularly if certain ways to build can appear to have the perception of adding cost to a project. You can do it at a lower cost if your subject matter expertise is in that area, then just do it.
It's like you've been hired for a reason. So you might say, well, part of the reason you come to work with Lisa at Precinct is because you know that they're going to develop assets that are really resilient in terms of climate change and sustainability. And that's what they do there. So if you're talking to them, that's part of it.
when you enter the workforce, don't be afraid to challenge the norms on that basis, because we're entering a new age of a lot of different things, and we're looking to young people to help guide us as to what the best way to do things is. And I think the learning that you're picking up now and the way that you're approaching your industry is something that we need fresh insight into. So challenge us and help us be better. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all out in the field,
Awesome.
engaging.
Well, thank you. That brings us to the end. Sorry, we won't be able to get to that last question, just conscious of time. But we've got our next session called Find Your Levers coming up on the 18th of August. So you'll probably get an email from Siobhan or Anne and Amanda about that. And maybe that question, I'm sure we could answer that if you can keep it in mind for next time. Thank you, Kishan. Thank you, Lisa. Give you a clap.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
That was absolutely superb. And I think, Caden, we'll come back to your question perhaps after the session. But thank you so much, everyone. Brilliant. I think that final word you said there about challenging the norms, so absolutely vital. When you look at some of the youth movements that are happening globally at the moment, I think there are some changes afoot, and it is up to many of our younger people to actually take that challenge ahead. I think it's an amazing way that they are doing so. So thank you. Look forward to seeing you at our third session, and details to follow. But thanks so much for joining us this evening. Good night, ka kite.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so